Welcome to Animal Attacks. Are you ready for more rule breakers getting what they deserved? This time, we're going on safari trips where people were eaten alive. From a tourist who literally dangled herself over the side of a canoe into crocodile infested water, to two friends who slipped away from their armed guide to follow fresh lion tracks. But first, we start with a man who decided that saving himself a mile-long walk was worth cutting straight across a hippo floodplain. It was September 18, 2016, on the open floodplain between satellite camps in South Luangwa National Park, Zambia, and somewhere in the last quarter mile of daylight. A 31-year-old man from Oregon made a decision that a grazing 2-ton predator had already made instinctively for him. Dante Tomlinson ran inventory at a warehouse distribution center outside Eugene, a job he described to coworkers as functional and deeply boring. He had spent 4 years saving for the Overland Africa trip, cutting weekends, skipping vacations, watching departure dates on travel forums the way other people watch sports. He had done serious backcountry hiking in the Cascades and the Olympics and knew how to read terrain. What Dante didn't have, and what many of us don't have, is any real experimental frame for African maggot fauna. Backpacking the Pacific Northwest trains you to respect bears at a distance. It does not prepare you for an animal that kills more humans in sub-Saharan Africa than almost any other. Hippos are not grazers that wander casually. They are territorial, deeply habitual, and they use the same overland paths from water to feeding ground every single night, committing those routes to memory over years. A mature bull maintains his own corridor and treats any obstruction as a direct threat. They reach speeds exceeding 19 miles per hour on land. Their bite force exceeds 1,800 pounds per square inch. The rangers at camp briefed guests on all of this during afternoon orientation. The briefing included a specific instruction. After 4:30 p.m., guests moving between camps were required to use the designated access road along the eastern perimeter. The road added approximately 0.9 miles. Dante had been told this directly. He acknowledged it. Then he asked how enforced it was. Honestly, reading through accounts like this, what bothers me most isn't the risk itself. It's that the information was right there, delivered clearly, and still dismissed as an inconvenience. A camp tracker working near the trailhead noticed Dante stepping off the path around 5 to 10 p.m. and called after him. Dante waved the man off. He had already spotted the grazing trail, the flat pressed grass, the wide hoof impressions driven deep into soft soil, each one the width of a dinner plate. He kept walking. At approximately 5:22 p.m., a safari vehicle traveling the access road spotted Dante moving through the central floodplain. The guide cut his engine. The bull emerged from a reed channel to Dante's left, not from the river, but from an intermediate resting position between two feeding areas. Dante was directly between the animal and its return route. The hippo charged without vocalization. Dante turned. He did not run more than 2 steps. The first bite closed across both legs simultaneously, lifting him completely off the ground. The guide later told rangers it looked mechanical, just force applied without hesitation. The bull slammed him into the mud twice. The second bite drove across the pelvis. The next bite entered the lower abdominal cavity. The bull then began shoving the body laterally toward a shallow channel using repeated lateral head sweeps, pausing twice to bite again into the torso. The entire sequence lasted under 60 seconds. The hippo remained nearby, facing the approaching responders and making repeated threat displays until it was driven back. I cannot imagine what that guide had to carry home that night. The safari driver radioed park control at 5:23 p.m. and rangers and a medical team arrived 26 minutes later. The hippo had to be driven back before recovery was possible. The post-mortem examination documented massive bilateral femoral fractures, complete pelvic disruption, and evisceration of the lower abdominal cavity consistent with repeated large animal bite trauma. His family received his belongings, including the spreadsheet, 11 days later. A small service was held in Eugene. The safari camp reinforced its evening safety briefings the following morning, and that detail alone tells you something about how little weight a single death carries against the rhythm of an operation. If Dante ignored one warning before he even started walking, this next one ignored the same warning 3 times because the lighting wasn't right for a photo. It was May 7th, 2018, on the Okavango Delta in Botswana, where the water moves so slowly it barely looks like it moves at all, and where the things that live beneath it have learned to use that stillness as a weapon. If you ask me, that's exactly the kind of place that tricks you into feeling safer than you actually are. Lynette Cuyo was 29 years old and taught art at an elementary school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She had spent 8 months planning the trip, the flights, the lodges, the excursions, and had documented every stage of it on her social media with the kind of careful consistency that suggested the documentation mattered as much as the experience itself. She was well liked at her school, described by colleagues as energetic and detail-oriented. This was her first trip to Africa, taken with 3 co-workers after the school year ended, and she had already told people back home she intended to come back the following summer. She carried 2 cameras and a GoPro on the Mokoro and had photographed nearly everything since landing in Maun 2 days prior. Now, something that you have to understand is that Okavango Delta is not a river in any conventional sense. Nile crocodiles are endemic to the delta and are among the most anatomically efficient ambush predators on Earth. Adults commonly exceed 14 feet and can weigh over 1,500 pounds. Their bite force, measured at over 3,700 pounds per square inch, is sufficient to crush bone without effort. The group's guide, a man named O Rabile, who had worked the Delta for 11 years, gave the same briefing he gave every group. Stay seated, stay centered, keep everything inside the canoe. He gave it again when the group boarded at the camp launch. He stopped paddling and instructed everyone to remain still roughly 30 minutes into the float when Lynette shifted toward the gunwale and held her phone above the water. She lowered it back after he spoke. The sun had been creating glare on the surface all morning, washing out her photos, and she had complained about it to the woman seated behind her twice. I've read about enough of these cases to know that frustration with something small is always what causes people to override good judgment. Around 11:20 a.m., the canoe entered a wider channel bordered by dense papyrus on the eastern bank. Orabil noted the stillness of the water and slowed his paddling. Lynette had moved into a kneeling position at the bow. She was holding the GoPro on its handle, her arm extended almost fully over the right side of the gunwale, the camera dipping close to the surface. Orabile told her directly to sit down. She did not. I'm not going to pretend I understand what goes through a person's mind in that moment, but the guide was not being cautious for sport. What witnesses described next happened in under 2 seconds. There was no buildup. There was an explosion of white water off the right side of the bow, the kind of displacement that comes from something very large, moving very fast, from directly below, and then Lynette's upper body was gone over the side. The crocodile had taken her upper right arm and shoulder. The canoe lurched hard to the right. The woman behind her grabbed the backpack straps and pulled. The straps tore at the seams and she fell backward into the hull. Lynette was screaming. Then she wasn't. The crocodile pulled her underwater before beginning to roll in deeper water. The violent rotation caused catastrophic tearing to the shoulder and upper arm, resulting in a traumatic amputation of the right arm. Blood spread across the channel's surface in a wide, dark arc before the crocodile resurfaced approximately 40 feet from the canoe, moving north with the body still locked in its jaws. It did not resurface again. Orabile radioed camp immediately. A motorized rescue boat reached the channel in 15 minutes. Recovery, not rescue. Coroner's findings noted catastrophic traumatic amputation of the right upper extremity, multiple rib fractures, extensive thoracic crush injuries, and drowning as the terminal event. The body was repatriated to New Mexico 11 days later after coordination between the Botswana government and the U.S. Embassy pharmacy in Gaborone. Her 3 co-workers received crisis counseling at the lodge before flying home separately. The Delta does not move fast enough to seem dangerous, and that is precisely why it is. Dumb decisions have a geography, and it tends to be beautiful. Lynette ignored a guide who was right in front of her, and it cost her everything. The next guy also had a guide telling him exactly what not to do. He just thought the animals would do the courtesy of cooperating. It was August 11th, 2015 in Kruger National Park. A pride of 7 lions lay scattered across the red dirt beside the road, bellies swollen, limbs loose, the kind of stillness that makes people forget what they're looking at. Bradley Pavone was 35 years old, an insurance adjuster from Columbus, Ohio, who spent most of his professional life behind a desk, assessing damage he never witnessed firsthand. The Kruger trip was his brother idea, a celebration before Bradley's promotion to senior claims director, a role that would likely anchor him to an office for the next decade. Bradley had never been to Africa. He had booked the mid-range safari package, arrived 2 days earlier, and had already earned a reputation among the group as the loudest person in the vehicle. Not unpleasantly so, but the kind of man who narrated everything as it happened and laughed at his own observations before finishing them. He photographed constantly. He had told Deontay the night before that he wanted one image worth framing. The lion pride had fed the previous evening on a buffalo carcass roughly 1/4 mile north of the road, and several lions still bore visible blood staining on their muzzles and forepaws. Adult female lions in Kruger typically weigh between 260 and 400 pounds and can accelerate to nearly 50 miles per hour in short bursts. They do not require hunger as a trigger for aggression. Territory, perceived threat, and proximity are sufficient. The guide, a veteran operator named Dion who had run that circuit for 11 years, addressed the vehicle before they stopped. He explained, plainly and without drama, that satiated lions are not safe lions, that their proximity to the road did not indicate comfort with humans on foot, and that the instruction to remain inside the vehicle is one of the most fundamental safety rules in Kruger National Park. I've read accounts of guides giving this exact speech and being ignored anyway, and it never stops being infuriating. Bradley acknowledged the instruction. He also spotted a second safari truck, stopped roughly 60 yards ahead, angled for a better view of the nearest lioness, and began calculating the difference in perspective. He stepped off the running board without announcement. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Deontay saw him go and said nothing for the first few seconds, likely assuming Bradley would stop at the vehicle's bumper. People have stepped out of safari vehicles before without immediately provoking an attack. Bradley, however, kept walking. He did not stop there. He moved forward along the road unhurried, phone raised, covering approximately 35 feet of open ground toward the nearest lioness, despite the warning he had just been given before she lifted her head. What happened next took under 4 seconds from the moment she rose. I don't think most people understand how little time that actually is. She did not vocalize. She crossed the distance in a straight line and struck him from the front, driving both forepaws into his chest and dropping him flat onto his back. The impact was audible to passengers in both vehicles. His phone landed in the dirt several feet to his right. The lioness closed her jaw across his throat while he was still moving. The sounds that followed, described by witnesses in both vehicles as wet, repetitive, and brief, lasted under 90 seconds before a second lioness rose from the grass to his left and locked onto his upper right thigh, pulling downward with her full body weight, while the first maintained her grip on his neck. His legs moved twice, then they didn't. This is the part that stays with me every time I go back through witness statements, the speed at which a human being becomes entirely still. Dion sounded the vehicle horn repeatedly and edged the truck forward, following the emergency response procedures taught by his safari company, and it accomplished almost nothing in real time. Both lionesses responded to the horn by dragging the body laterally off the road into the drainage brush, disappearing into cover within seconds. The entire sequence from Bradley stepping out of the vehicle to disappearance was under 3 minutes. Deontay made the emergency call immediately. Rangers arrived in approximately 18 minutes. Recovery of the body required 2 vehicles and a separately dispatched unit to relocate the pride. The coroner's summary noted death by mechanical asphyxia resulting from traumatic cervical injuries. Death preceded ranger arrival. Park officials concluded the lions behaved normally. Dion returned to guiding several weeks later, and I'm genuinely relieved that one reckless decision didn't permanently end the career of a man who did everything right. The failure that morning belonged entirely to the person who stepped off the vehicle. Bradley walked toward a pride of lions because he thought full meant harmless. The next guy didn't walk toward anything dangerous at all. He was just trying to do something nice for his wife. It was November the 3rd, 2019, and the Sabi Sand Game Reserve had already surrendered its last light by the time Nolan Eber pushed back from the dinner table, folded his napkin, and slipped out of the lodge without telling anyone where he was going. Nolan was 42, a civil engineer from Red Deer, Alberta, a man who calculated load tolerances and soil compression for a living, someone whose entire professional identity was built around knowing how much a structure could take before it failed. He had been married to his wife, Dana, for 15 years, and this trip was his idea from the start. A splurge, a reset, 12 days in the bush because she had always wanted it and he had always deferred. He had also packed a mirrorless camera with a 400mm lens, had read extensively about nocturnal wildlife behavior on the flight over, and had spent 3 evenings photographing impala from the deck railing with increasing confidence. He had a specific shot in mind, the waterhole at night, ideally a cat at the bank, framed by the low glow of the camp perimeter lights. He wanted to show Dana the photo over breakfast and watch her face. I've definitely chased just one more photo before, and it's way too easy to convince yourself it'll only take a minute. The footpath from the main lodge to the waterhole hide was 340 feet long, unpaved, flanked by acacia scrub and 3 mature marula trees, whose branches began spreading roughly 12 feet off the ground. I've looked at photographs of that path taken in daylight, and even then, it has a corridor quality. Enclosed, directional, the kind of route that funnels movement. At night, without a torch of sufficient power, it would narrow further in your perception, the darkness pressing in from both sides. The lodge operated under a standing policy, communicated at check-in, repeated at dinner briefings, and posted at every exit. No guests on footpaths after dark without an armed escort. The lodge properties within the Sabi Sand ecosystem are not separated by interior game fencing, allowing wildlife to move freely between them. Leopard, lion, hyena, and elephant move through lodge properties nightly without restriction. A female leopard typically weighs between 90 and 140 pounds, yet can haul prey heavier than herself into trees to keep it away from scavengers. Around a cached kill, leopards become highly defensive and may launch an immediate attack if someone unknowingly passes too close. Unlike many large predators, they often strike without warning, relying on surprise, speed, and a powerful bite. The reserve's head ranger had radioed the lodge that afternoon about a female leopard observed dragging an impala carcass into a marula tree, approximately 200 feet from the main deck of cache, which is how leopards preserve a kill from scavengers, wedging the body into a fork and returning to feed over several days. This information had been passed to senior staff. It had not yet reached the dinner briefing scheduled for the following morning. Nolan left through a side gate at approximately 9:20 p.m. A staff member saw him cross the deck with his camera bag, but assumed he was heading to the railing overlook. No one flagged it in time. The footpath curves slightly left before straightening toward the hide, and the third marula tree, the one with the impala carcass lodged in its upper fork, sits on the outside of that curve, directly above where the path runs closest to the root base. What happened next lasted less than 8 seconds. Startled beneath her cached impala, the female leopard dropped from the tree without warning, knocking Nolan to the ground before delivering a devastating bite to the back of his neck and raking his back with her hind claws. She released him almost immediately and disappeared into the nearby scrub, leaving nearby guests to realize what had happened only after the sounds had fallen silent. Lodge security reached the path in 12 minutes. Nolan's body was found approximately 15 feet from the point of the initial attack. The leopard had already retreated into the scrub. Nolan was pronounced dead at the scene. There is something that has stayed with me since I first read this case. that the anniversary of the beginning of something became, in the most literal sense, the end of everything. The lodge installed motion lighting and additional night patrols the following week. It was the right call, years too late, for a man who simply wanted one good photograph. Nolan didn't know the rules he was breaking. The next two did, they just decided the rules didn't apply to them. It was July 24th, 2013, and the Chobe River crossing at the eastern transit route of Chobe National Park, Botswana, was running nearly 2 feet deeper than the level indicated on the depth marker beside the crossing, the kind of detail most people glanced at before pulling away. Lena Orsic was 27, a florist from Split who had a reputation for working 14-hour days in the week before Valentine's Day and never complaining about it. She was deliberate, organized, and had researched this trip for 8 months: budget safari accommodations, self-drive routes, riverside campsites. Tomas Jelak, her husband of 6 days, was 30 and worked as a diesel mechanic at a shipping yard outside Rijeka. He was the kind of man who could rebuild an engine in a gravel lot and had done exactly that more than once. They had saved for 3 years for this honeymoon and chosen southern Africa specifically because it was raw and unmanaged in ways that packaged resorts were not. Now, I think that reasoning was not wrong. It just required a discipline they ran out of at the wrong moment. Posted at the crossing entrance were laminated warning signs fixed to metal stakes, one in English, one in Afrikaans, one in Setswana. They stated clearly that vehicles must not stop mid-crossing and that occupants must remain inside the vehicle at all times. If I'm seeing warnings repeated in multiple languages, I'm assuming they're written because somebody already paid the price. I want to be honest with you. What happened next was not a freak accident. It was a sequence of choices that took roughly 4 minutes to become fatal. The Land Cruiser stalled approximately 40 feet into the crossing, where the water reached the lower door seams. Tomas tried the ignition once, but the engine did not catch. Instead of attempting another restart, Tomas and Lena climbed out onto the hood. The German family later told rangers they shouted from the bank. The couple waved back and held up the camera. A bull hippo surfaced roughly 10 feet off the driver's side, its nostrils and ears breaking the surface only moments before its head emerged. An adult bull hippo weighs between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds, can hold its breath for up to 5 minutes, and surfaces unpredictably in water that looks entirely still. They are widely regarded as one of Africa's most dangerous large mammals, not from aggression in the predatory sense, but from territorial defense that is immediate, total, and without hesitation. It was already bellowing before it fully cleared the waterline, a sound witnesses described as low and percussive, more felt than heard. The couple did not move immediately. The hippo lunged almost immediately, striking the Land Cruiser broadside with its head and upper body. The vehicle rocked hard to the right. It struck again, and the cruiser rolled onto its passenger side, both occupants entering the water almost simultaneously. The water came to chest height on a standing adult. Tomas was the first one the hippo reached. It took him around the torso, its jaws spanning from his lower ribs to his hip and compressed. The sound the German family described was not a scream. It was a single sharp exhalation, the kind a person makes when the air is forced out of them involuntarily. The hippo released and threw him approximately 6 feet before turning. This is the part that stays with me. Lena was trying to reach the underside of the overturned vehicle when the hippo seized her across the hips. As it turned and submerged, she was pulled beneath the surface with it. She came up once, briefly. Then it pulled her under again. Neither of them surfaced after that. The German driver made the satellite call to park authorities at approximately 10:22 that morning. Rangers arrived with a rescue boat 31 minutes later. Both bodies were recovered within the hour. Coroner summary. Tomas Jelak, male, age 30, cause of death. Crush injuries to the thoracic cavity with bilateral rib fracture and internal hemorrhage consistent with large animal bite force. Lena Orsic, female, age 27, cause of death. Drowning secondary to traumatic pelvic injury and incapacitation. Both deaths ruled accidental. The crossing was closed for 4 days. When it reopened, the warning signs had been replaced with larger boards illustrated in 6 languages. I genuinely do not understand what it takes for a sign to be taken seriously, because apparently multiple signs, a warning from a passing ranger, plus a shouting family on the bank was not enough. Tomas and Lena ignored a warning sign. The next 2 ignored a living, breathing human being screaming directly at them to stop. It was June 14th, 2020, in Hwange National Park, Zimbabwe. Some stories don't fall apart because of one terrible decision. They unravel through a series of tiny ones that barely register in the moment. I think this one is one of those stories, and by the time anyone realized it, they were already behind. Malcolm was 34, an electrician from Maribor, Slovenia, the kind of man who spent his weekdays inside industrial panels and his weekends researching places most people only see on screensavers. His friend Pavel Rizan, 33, had grown up on 2 streets over and had agreed to split the cost after Malcolm sent him a 6-paragraph message about why this was the right way to see Africa. He was methodical, confident, and genuinely curious, the combination that serves a man well in most situations and very poorly in a few specific ones. Hwange is Zimbabwe's largest national park, covering 5,600 square miles of mopane, woodland, open grassland, and dense riverine thicket that holds one of the continent's highest lion densities. African lions are ambush predators. Adult males can weigh over 400 pounds, reach a sprint speed of 50 miles per hour in short bursts, and can use powerful jaws and neck muscles to fatally compress the airway and major blood vessels within moments. They do not stalk the way leopards do. They wait, compressed into cover, and they use proximity rather than distance. By the time you hear movement, the geometry of the situation has already resolved against you. Their guide that morning had done this for 11 years. Before the group left the vehicle, he ran through the rules with a kind of specificity that comes from having seen what happens when people don't listen. Single file, no deviation, no stopping without instruction. Stay close behind the person in front of you. He was carrying a rifle. Malcolm nodded. Pavel nodded. I don't think either of them took as seriously as they should have. And I think they both knew it in the moment and dismissed anyway. Roughly 40 minutes into the walk, they crossed a section of soft red soil where a set of lion tracks pressed deep and clear across the path. Large, very fresh, the edges still crisp. Malcolm crouched and looked at them, then looked at Pavel. The guide identified them as belonging to at least one adult male, likely made earlier that morning, and told the group to stay tight and move with more deliberate steps. What happened next is the part I keep turning over. Malcolm paused beside the tracks, and Pavel stopped with him. The guide noticed immediately and ordered them back into line, but, drawn by a second set of tracks veering into the brush line to the east, they stepped off the trail and into the thicket. The guide shouted at them immediately. They did not stop. The lion was less than 20 yards inside the brush. It came out of cover low and fast, covering the distance in under 2 seconds. It hit Malcolm in the chest with enough force to take him off his feet entirely. There was no charge sequence, no warning sound, just sudden, violent contact. The lion pinned Malcolm's chest with both forelegs and closed its jaws around his throat. Malcolm's arms came up. His hands pressed against the animal's face and neck. Within approximately 15 seconds, the movement in his arms stopped. Pavel was standing 4 feet away. He did not run. He stood there watching, which I think says something. about how completely the brain can fail to process what the eyes are sending it. The guide arrived, shouting and advancing toward the lion. With no safe shot while the lion was on Malcolm, he fired a round into the ground several yards from the animal. The lion released the body, gripped it again at the shoulder, dragged it approximately 8 yards through the brush, then released it and retreated into the thicket. Pavel ran back toward the trail. The guide radioed park headquarters while keeping eyes on the brush line. Rangers and paramedics arrived in roughly 20 minutes. Malcolm was pronounced dead at the scene. Pavel gave his statement to investigators the following morning. He flew home 4 days later. I have thought about what those 4 days looked like for him, and I honestly cannot get there. The investigation concluded that the pair had violated every core protocol established for guided walking safaris and that the outcome was a direct consequence of that decision. Reading this story back, the death feels inevitable by the second paragraph. And that, more than anything else, is what makes it generally difficult to sit with.